Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart Skills Talk Series. This is us beginning at the beginning. My name's Jamie Black. I am the founder of Wildcraft Play and Earth Guides. And this Heart Skills Talk Series has come from a place of recognizing that there are a lot of nuances and skills required to support children and youth and even adults in social and emotional regulation, as well as just the basics of how to collaborate, how to make group decisions, all of that kind of stuff. So, from years of hosting this type of conversation, I decided to create a space where folks are welcome to join in and engage in the conversation. So before we begin, I just want to give a little bit of an outline of the logistics of this group, and then I'm going to share a land acknowledgement. So the logistics here are, we're using the Circle app to host this room. And they're down on the right-hand side, there's a little chat box. Feel free to comment there or ask questions there. I'll have it up on my screen and take a look. So if you have any questions, go ahead and take a look there. And I will be sharing some information from my screen, and I'm looking forward to just sharing sort of an overarching perspective on what heart skills are. So before I dive into all of that, please feel free to ask me any questions. I see that some of you are popping on here. It's nice to see you. Welcome. And this is an example of emotional regulation right now, because when I give a land acknowledgement, I get a bit nervous because I want to say it correctly. I want to say the names correctly. I want to really, truly honor the people on this land. So I am currently sitting on the unceded traditional territories of the Comox First Nations peoples. These peoples began as what we know as the Pentlatch peoples. So that lineage came and was on this land. And soon after, the Ayikson, Sasitla, Sathlut, and those communities came together and have created what we now know as the Comox First Nations peoples. So I just invite you to close your eyes and take a moment, take a breath. And in your own language, in your own way, acknowledge the First Nations peoples who were there before you, who are there now, and who will be there long after you. Feel that tether of a relationship between you and them. And imagine some actionable steps that you can take to strengthen that bond, whether it be from afar or in person, whether it be sending love, whether it be showing up at events, whatever encourages you to build a relationship with the land and with the people of that land. Gaelic Kasla. All right, well, let's dive in. Let's begin at the beginning. All right, maybe not quite the beginning, but yeah, I jotted down some notes here because there's so many things that I could say about heart skills. And what I want to start with is sort of an overarching understanding of what heart skills are. So I use these phrases: heart skills, hand skills, head skills, and spirit skills, because I want to support the emotional, the physical, the mental, and spiritual aspects of you, of people, of you helping people in that way. So when it comes to navigating behaviors, emotions, and social skills with children, youth, or even adults, I want to open a discussion about in a way that allows people to express ideas and can be heard and held. And I'm inviting people like you to consider showing up to these sessions, or even being interviewed if you have the knowledge and the skills that you would like to share with other people. So the idea here is not to profess that we have the answer, but it's to dig deeper into the issues, into the hard parts. I'm not afraid of going to those hard conversations in these talks. I actually want to dig up the harder things, the things people are struggling with, because that's where knowledge and wisdom and healing come. For the past 14 years, I have been studying engagement by creating a game that I call Wildcraft Play. I created this game because I wanted to recreate a video game, which stemmed from in 2010, I was the manager at a Boys and Girls Club in Nanaimo. And I called out to everyone and I said, "Who wants to go play outside?" And everyone kind of moaned. It wasn't raining. It was colder, but it wasn't raining. Everybody moaned, and one kid said, "I just want to play on my DS." And in that moment, I swallowed my pride and I was like, "Oh, okay, cool, show me." And I sat next to this child. He was so precious. He was 8 years old. And I said, "Show me, what's so exciting about your DS?" And he sets it all up and he's playing Minecraft and he's going along and he's like, "I get to play, I get to explore in nature." And every part of my being was irked. And I wanted to know why. I didn't ask that child, I didn't dig into their psyche, I didn't, go there, but it sent me on a deep dive, so much so that I ended up studying my children's program a number of years later to unpack what it is about creating engaging experiences that can then increase internal motivation and decrease negative behaviors. So I want to share my screen. This is the first time I'm sharing a screen here. So let's see how this works. Share screen. So this is my research. And I want to show you just a couple of things here. The children that attended Wildcraft Play had many emotional and social issues. This was a private school on Salt Spring Island. And I noticed that their engagement in the program seemed to improve their behaviors. The two leaders for the Wildcraft Play camps, one of whom was an experienced school teacher, the other a karate instructor, were surprised with how well the children responded to the program. And in my opinion, it was a 110% success rate from this was my very first, the story I'm sharing here was my very first experiment with creating this game. Over the next 3 years, Wildcraft Play was integrated into programming for children ages 8 to 12 at Horn Lake Caves, Central Vancouver Island, different regions and in Vancouver and on the Sunshine Coast. And based on a digital game-like experience, the program included questing, finding gold and other treasures, and doing interesting tasks while experiencing canoeing, caving, rock rappelling, wilderness survival, campfires, field games, and nighttime activities. So the feedback from the children was used to improve the game. Every time I played the game, I tried something on, and then we would see what would happen. So one of the stories, one of my most favorite stories to tell was I had scheduled about 40 minutes for me to set up what I call the sacred marketplace. And I had duct tape and string and glue and random objects, just very inexpensive random objects, but I gave them all labels. So duct tape was metallic skin, and we had sequins there, so it was the scales of the dragon. So it just like it, I piqued their imagination because I changed what everything was called, and I had these neat little labels, and I became a merchant. And I was a traveling merchant. I was selling my wares, and I was only going to be there for a short while. So how can I be of service? And they got to purchase things with their gold coins. And I thought it would only last about 40 minutes. It ended up lasting 4 hours. And in a very short amount of time, each character just built this whole persona. One child came up to me and didn't want to spend any of his money. And he's like, do I have to pay for anything? Do I have to buy something? I said, no, but you do, as an archer, you do need to have gauntlets. You need a bow and an arrow, and then you'll be ready to go. So he runs off. He grabs his socks that he had packed, and he asked me for a pair of scissors. And he cut off the toe of his socks and put them on. And I said, don't tell your parents that we've done this. So that little persona, he just like was developing. And then there was an artist who was a starving artist who just so modeled that their creativity was amazing, but they really weren't very good at marketing themselves. And so I would put a marketing or a salesperson in touch with the artist and help them promote themselves, so they would draw all of the characters. But and then there were these two other youth. One youth came up to me and had no idea what we were doing. She just wanted me to tell her what to do. She was so confused. She really was bothered by this experience. She hated it. She walked away and sat by a tree with her arms crossed and just didn't want to have anything to do with it. And in that moment, I was like, okay, I didn't need to solve her problem for her. I didn't need to engage her. I've learned that the hard way. I don't need to engage them. They will engage themselves at some point. So there's another girl who came up to me and she's like, so if I buy these materials and I buy a whole bunch, would you give me a discount? And I was like, yes, if you buy lots, I will give you a discount. And if I hire people to make, she was making these little halo wreath things out of, it was just pieces of like tall grasses, but she knew how to braid. So she was braiding them and adding beads to them and stuff. And she's like, if I hire other people to do that, am I allowed to do that? Yes, of course you can. So sure enough, she spent all her money on buying all the resources and hiring people to do it. But then she was like, well, how much should I charge for these things? And I said, well, how much did it cost? How much did all these bits cost? And then I was like, okay, charge 200% or 300% of that. And she's like, what does that mean? And so we did the math together. She charged it, and then she became the wealthiest one within about 4 hours. She was the wealthiest and most respected person there because she gave so many people jobs. And she was very kind and very helpful. And she taught a bunch of people how to do the things that she knew how to do. In the journey of that happening, there was that child that was over by the tree, arms crossed, didn't understand what was going on. She came up to me with curiosity. What's she doing? I hooked her. She hooked herself, really. And I said, why don't you go and ask? And so she went over and she asked, she came back. She's like, she won't tell me what she's doing. I was like, okay, then why don't you sit here and watch with me? Let's watch what she's doing. And then I would explain, see how she has a skill and she's decided to hire other people to do that skill. So she has to teach them. And do you listen to her tone of voice? Do you see her eyebrows are raised? Do you see that the way she speaks to people, people want to come closer to her? And she's like, yeah. It was just this most precious moment. And it made me realize my role in helping these behaviors change to this. So I could have really focused on the problems of that child, but instead I used an external experience and observation and witnessing and sitting alongside her to help her find her own internal motivation to want to be happier and want to be engaged and want to play and want to know what's going on. So shortly after, once I spent a lot of time trying to explain this stuff to her, I said, why don't you just go sit next to her? And I'll tell her that you're just going to sit next to her. You're not going to do anything, but you're just going to sit there and you're going to observe what she's doing. So we did that. And it was so precious. It was so valuable for her to witness because she needed the time. Not everybody can just figure things out so quickly. She needed a lot of time to figure out what was going on because I make the assumption that in her life, nobody has ever just set up an experience and not told her what to do. It's also possible that she had FASD, fetal alcohol syndrome. And we can go more into that in a little bit. So going back to my research, I have this little quote here from my supervisor, Hillary Layton, 2014. She wrote, schooling today still privileges the intellect and cognitive powers in opposition to our natural human emotionality, intuitions, and introspection, and for the most part leaves off other important sites of learning, such as human relationships, relationships with nature, and the wisdom of the body. I just want to let that sink in for a second. Many of my elders, many of my mentors say there's not enough information out there. There's not enough encouragement to help children follow their intuition. I'm going to say that again. There's not enough support and time spent to allow children to figure out what their intuition is, what that internal motivation is. So I could have told that child exactly what to do in that moment. I could have said, oh, it's okay. You don't need to worry. Do you want to go have a snack? Do you want to go drink some water? No, she was frustrated. She wanted to play, but she didn't know how, and she didn't know what was going on. Okay. I often say that. Well, why don't you tell me what to do? I don't think that's my job. My job here is not to tell you what to do. So I hear you. Well, what do I do now? Okay, well, maybe sit down and watch for a little bit. What do you notice? What do you see? What does your body say? What are you drawn towards? What is your inner compass? This is a neat one. What does your inner compass say? Which direction is it pointing you to? Some of this information, like if I did a whole piece just on intuition, I think it would last a very long time. I digress. All right, going back to the research, the last little piece I wanted to share with you. So when I did my research, I actually did 14 hours of video recording. So I also generated these facilitative approaches. So there's some information around written by oh, I'm gapping. Coyote's Guide. Oh, that's so funny. I've lost his name. It's really funny. They have, okay, just hold on 1 second. Let me just see if I can, here we go. They have what's called the indicators of awareness. And in my research, what I realized is that I wasn't able to quantify awareness, but I was able to quantify engagement by their actions. And so I created these indicators of engagement for my research. So if they're not engaged, they have apathy, there's boredom, they're agitated, they're distracted. But if they are engaged, especially at the beginning, they're present and they're listening. And then that turns into curiosity and commenting. Then they're activated and motivated and they're doing something. Then they're passionately focused and participating. And then when it's time to take a break, they just free play. And then when it's time to gather and share, they're present and they're sharing. So those are aspects of engagement. So in my research, throughout all these videos, I write about when they're focused, when they have that focused listening, when children feel that they have truly been heard and are invited to tell me more. So when, you know, something's happening and I say, tell me more, their words are reflected back to them. This has a positive effect on their emotional response and encourages a sense of relaxed flow. I could go for days and talk about flow. Kind of like what happens when you see a rock climber get really into what they're doing, that they've like they have no sense of what's going on outside themselves. They're really engaged in what they're doing. That relaxed flow. They seek out interactions with the facilitator, so they actively come to the leader because they want more information, they want knowledge. And it's only then that we give it to them instead of at the beginning, like most teachings are taught. So this is just a little bit about my research and where I come from and why I'm sharing this information. So in this Heart Skills Talk series, I have a whole bunch of topics that I'm hoping to integrate. And maybe I'll just put that too, just to make life easier. I want to talk about the antecedents of an issue, the antecedents of a behavior. We'll go more into that later, but it just means what caused that behavior. And it may be something obvious and localized to the scenario, but it also may be something environmental. It may be trauma, family history. There's all sorts of reasons why a behavior comes. What do we do in these moments for self-regulations? What do we as behavior support people do for self-regulation? What are best practices to transition if a behavior comes up? How do we transition out of it? How do we transition them away from the group? How do we transition them from hurting themselves? How do we ensure everyone is safe? How do we regulate ourselves after? That's a big one. Where can we go to debrief? And what does it mean to spend time in nature? I can spend days on that conversation. A 30-second self-regulation practice that I have been using for years and I highly recommend. Quiet and unguided time. So as long as they're safe, that's enough. Hands-off approach. Very much what I like to do is be very hands-off with kiddos to allow them to stumble and fall and make mistakes and engage and practice and try again and learn by doing. Intervening like Jiminy Cricket. So we often have our support workers called crickets in Wildcraft Play. We do live action role play. And so when they're a cricket, they're like Jiminy Cricket, this little cricket on their shoulder that's whispering the teachings into their ear. The power of a good debrief. Intervention. Teachings of how to meet a family for the first time. Teachings on what to do when there is an issue. Taking a moment. Personal care as a guide for those harder moments. Identifying typical behaviors of ADHD, autism, ODD. I'm going to add FASD in here. PDA, anxiety, depression, trauma, and I'm sure there's more. Scenario-based decisions of issues and group brainstorming for solutions and other topics that relate to very specific scenarios around suicidal talk, cutting, threats, avoidance, hygiene issues, oral fixation, stimming, and much more. So I just want to review the core topics. Navigating behaviors. Support workers for kids with complex behaviors look for ways to handle specific needs, like being flexible and creative in their approach. For example, kids with conditions like PDA or ODD might respond better to choices and incentives rather than being told what to do directly. By using tools that include their interests, caregivers can reduce pushback and make cooperation easier. I also want to name that if we coddle a child and don't push their edges, they will not learn the skills they will need to be an effective adult. So I'm going to add in here and not to coddle people, to push their edges and engage them to find their own internal motivation to want to be good. We'll dive more into that in the future. Supporting emotional intelligence. Many kids with ADHD, anxiety, or autism need help managing big feelings or impulsive actions. Support workers often use simple exercises that help kids recognize and handle their emotions, such as sensory tools, calming techniques, or mindfulness to keep them calm and in control when things get tough. And take it to another level is to help them practice doing it themselves. So instead of being the one to tell them to take a breath, they know when that they need to take a breath. Building social skills. Kids with these conditions often have trouble with social interactions. So support workers focus on teaching ways to improve social understanding and abilities. This could include planned social activities or role play to help kids learn social cues and handle different situations, especially important for those with autism or PDA. So I just want to offer a gentle reminder of the logistics of how these Heart Skills Talk series work. It's going to be about 20 to 40 minutes at 9 a.m. on Tuesdays. And so if you know of anybody who wants to talk about this information, we're going to do deep dives in each session into one of those topics that I named. And I'd also like to throw it out there that if you have a topic that you would prefer we start with, or you have a topic that was not named here, please, please, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to go over it. And if I don't have the information, we're going to call on somebody who does. So it's been an honor and a privilege to be here, have your undivided attention for all this time, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. I'd also like to say that if you don't know about it, the Earth Guides portal that we created is a safe community of support where you can either come in freely and engage with the resources that are there. This recording will be available for free. There's also a campfire that we sit around and have conversations. We also have on-land live action role play in our community in and around the Comox Valley and Campbell River area. And so there's many ways for you to feel supported and engaged and connect and access some of these teachings and these practices and just be held in your journey as somebody who works with children or youth in the world of play. So thank you for your time. And we all hope that we all hold you in divine light.